Tonight, a bush Agatha Christie on the trail of some missing mammals. The hippies who have turned sun and water power into $1 million business. And dealing with one of Australia's greatest challenges, land degradation. Hello and welcome to the program. Tonight, people who are looking at the world in a different light, searching for clues and new ways of dealing with our environmental problems. Who, for example, would think that bush like this has any value in terms of farming? Well, one farmer in Western Australia is set to change all our thinking. Less than 3 hours drive east of Perth is one of the nation's great food bowls, the West Australian wheat belt. Producing a third of the annual Australian harvest, these plains have been a gold mine. But the wealth of plump yellow grains has come at a price. 93% of the true blue bush has gone. Now, soil fertility is declining too. Fresh water is becoming scarce. 1 in 5 families is being forced off the land. It's an environment in crisis. This was the result of the summer windstorms of 1990. After each summer harvest, the ground is left exposed, and up to 50% of a farm's topsoil can be lost in a single blow. In a place like this, the ultimate irony is to inherit a property called paradise.
It's not our fault it's named Paradise. It's had 5 owners in 20 years. And one of the guys sort of just called out of mockery in early 1986. The farm advisor sort of summed up our position, as he does each year, and it said that, he said basically we owe a bit of coin, and the way things are shaping up with the amount of dirt that we've got, it wouldn't be able to support 3 families.
The Melvin family's story could have been one of gaining a paradise already lost. But Dean has added a remarkable new chapter. In fact, a whole do-it-yourself manual on resurrecting the wheat belt. The environmental problems in this region stem directly from its reliance on crops and pasture, which stay alive for only half the year. But the land here is adapted to perennial native vegetation.
A perennial plant like this grass has a root system that's alive and actively growing for 12 months of the year. It's using water for 12 months of the year. It's providing permanent cover to the soil. Where there's a deep root system like this, there's biological activity in the soil 12 months of the year, which helps give soil structure. In contrast to the present farming system, which is largely based on annuals.
The salvation of paradise came in the shape of some simple bush logic. Ted Lefroy had been trialling perennials with potential for use as fodder. But Dean was already one step ahead.
It's looking reasonable, Ted, isn't it? It's just like the bush down the road.
He'd been experimenting with the original perennials and had tested 100 of them.
Got the wattles and got the eucalypts together. Bit more of a balanced sort of situation here.
Dean's idea was not just to plant single trees or perennial grasses. He decided to try to mimic the bush by selecting the right combination of trees and planting them in rows. Not so unusual perhaps, except that in paradise, the rows are right in the middle of the paddocks. Spacing rows widely enough apart for machinery and animals to move with ease, you can continue with business as usual, growing wheat, sheep, anything you like.
Bush has been around for 40,000 years. There's very little salinity, there's nearly no wind blow, so that has to be a benchmark to work from.
Dean calls it alley farming, and from the air you can see why. Rows of native vegetation protect the crops or animals between, and stop the precious topsoil from blowing away. One of Dean's neighbours was so impressed, he decided to try the system out on one of his worst paddocks.
I started on this particular patch because it was my largest area of drifty sand. There's been no wind erosion whatsoever, even from the first year. And the pasture has picked up a lot in between as well. And the amount of grazing already, this is 4th year, would be equivalent to probably the best pasture on the farm now.
What Dean has shown is that he can plant back the bush in strips as he has, and it gives permanent cover to the soil. It's using water for 12 months of the year, so it's preventing salinity. And at the same time, it's increasing the yield from his crops and pastures by protecting them. And that alone can produce increases in up to 20% in crop yield. Now, a plant breeder working on different varieties of crops and pastures is happy with a 2% increase. The shelter effect we get from those trees is in the order of 20%. That's an enormous difference.
Up until now, the biggest problem with a scheme like this has been the cost of the trees.
Dean, are you on channel, Dean?
Yeah, I got you, Sharon.
Dean, I've just had a phone call. Have you got time to do another 4,000 acacia saligna?
Yep, no worries.
Dean's answer was to develop a cheap, reliable way of growing native plants from seed. Most of us have been told that doing this to a native plant is next to impossible. Yet Dean and his co-workers have found a way to literally rip the seedlings out of the ground in the same way one might pull out a carrot.
The guts to its success is that a bare-root plant has storage of energy, and that storage of energy is all that's needed for it to have a high survival rate. We've cut the top so they become extra bushy, simulating a roo or an emu coming along and nipping the top out. We've cut the bottom, simulating some grub coming underneath and biting the roots.
At 6 cents each, they're a fraction of the cost of seedlings grown in pots, and just as reliable.
Let's go.
It means a whole paddock can be planted for the cost of one application of the weed killer a wheat farmer would normally use. Dean owes much of what he's learnt to the bush. He noticed that nitrogen-rich plants like wattles always stand side by side with their nitrogen-poor mates, the eucalypts.
And half the reason we're having problems in our agricultural areas is things are just simply out of balance. So we've got nitrogen-making plants and non-nitrogen-making plants in our alleys, in alley farming, and they're together, and so they're complementing each other.
Dean Melvin still farms the traditional way, but turns as much of his land to alley farming as his finances will allow. At every turn, he's out to break the rules. His hope is that other farmers will follow, so that eventually the plants and animals that have been introduced to Australia can coexist with those alienated in their own land.
You ask me what's wrong with our present Australian farming systems. Well, apart from our grain quality going down each year, and apart from our soil and salinity increasing, apart from insecticide and herbicide resistance increasing, apart from the average cocky owing a couple of $100,000, I guess there's not a lot wrong with our present farming system.
Since Europe